Hi, thank you for tuning in to the Finding Harmony podcast with me, your host, Harmony Slater. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and I'm here with my co-host, Russell Case.
Harmony?
Hi.
We were falling asleep last night, and you fell asleep quite early.
More like I was falling asleep last night.
You fell asleep quite early. You typically several hours before I do. And
And I don't fall asleep that early. Like, it was after 10 p.m. So
anyway, I started binge watching Succession, and I saw an episode, and it was... do you remember the episode where they all go back to England to see Mum, and
Yes.
Mum lives in like a fucking palace,
yes,
or manse,
yes,
in some former slaveholders' residence,
yes,
and Kendall is having he's having a meltdown. He's kind of reckoning with his own addiction issues. He's reckoning with his choices have led to the death of a young man,
mm-hmm.
and he just needs to talk to Mom about it.
Yeah,
and she says, "Is this going to be quite a difficult conversation? Because wouldn't it be better over an egg?" You know.
right.
And he said, "Yeah. I'm really kind of struggling, Mom, but maybe it'd be better over an egg." And so he, as you remember, he wakes up.
Yeah, and she's gone.
She's fucking left.
She's not up for those difficult conversations.
She fucking took off, man.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there at the breakfast table, and Roman comes in and says, "Where's Mom? Are we having breakfast?" And eggies. And he's just like looking at the letter that his mom has left.
Like a dear Kendall letter.
Dear Kendall letter. And
I'm not up for difficult conversations.
It's such an example of what children of alcoholics kind of have to deal with. It's like not having a good enough mom. Like she's really not a good enough mom.
No.
And then first thing in the morning, you said to me, "Wake up, we're interviewing Lucinda about alcoholism."
Oh,
I'm like, all right.
No, it's not just about that. Hello, Lucinda. How are you?
Good morning, Lucinda.
I'm so good, guys. How are you?
Good. Well, you know what I did? I was just in Kansas City, and I binge watched on the way home all of season 5 of The Crown. And I was thinking of you because your grandfather was secretary to the Queen,
That's
right?
He was.
He's basically a character in that TV show.
Although they left him out, which is really sad. I think for continuity, because they would have been chopping and changing a lot the role. But
I know.
He is, yeah.
But he's in there in spirit. He's like that guy.
Yes, he's that guy. He's
secretary.
Martin, what's his name?
Yes.
Character. Yeah, that's him.
I'm sure they changed kind of off and on as much as prime ministers did.
They changed. Right? I think he was there for about 9 or 10 years.
Wow, that's a long time. That's amazing.
And so, help. We're not from. I lived there for some time, and I like to put on the airs and graces, but of course, it's very weirdly off my British accent. Can you help us with the whole? To me, he sounds like a servant. He's like a personal slave, but he's actually quite posh, and so that makes you posh, but you're actually just like the child of a slave, like the rest of us.
She's a child of bohemians.
But like your mom's sister went off with some rock star that you're going to tell us all about, and so help us with the whole class thing, because we have no class. You understand?
We only have ethnicity over here.
We just have money.
Right.
That's
and
all
money.
we have.
Well, it's decided by money, right? So whereas here it's decided by birth.
Right.
And actually, my grandfather was the first non-aristocrat to hold that position.
Wow.
So he was actually quite middle class, and worked incredibly hard, and so moved through various positions to get that position. And the private secretary is the Queen's closest advisor. They write a lot of her speeches with her, and they go everywhere with her. They travel everywhere with her. Yeah, I mean,
they do like all of her calendarizing as well.
Oh, it's like
and they do all of her.
Yeah, it's a chief of staff. It's exactly what
not
it is.
And personal advisor.
It's not a servant.
Yeah,
not just like a body man with a cup of tea. It's like,
no,
it's like a real.
No, I think they're her ladies in waiting and her butler and things like that.
Yeah, they hold the tea and This guy has the notepad and the calendar, and
he has the red box, box that comes in every day.
That's right.
He carries the red box.
Yeah, he brings it in every day.
Goodness. Fuck.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So,
wow, what a job.
But you can't really rise in class. Like once you're born, that's kind of it. Like you can't you're not going to be an aspiring aristocrat. That's not done.
No, so he can't suddenly make loads of money and get an estate and inherit a peerage. But what he did get was he became an honorary peer, so he was in the end Lord More, and he was a Sir before that. So they become part of the House of Lords, but it's not inherited. So we don't all then get to jolly around being lords and ladies.
This was
I'll call you Lady Lucinda.
Thank you. That would be great.
Sharad explained that same thing to me when I was exploring Hinduism. It's like, no,
caste,
not going to happen.
It's kind of the same thing as
caste. It's not going to happen for you.
Yeah,
you are not going to become Indian.
Like either you're Brahmin or you're not. Either you're
forever Westerner to me.
Yeah,
that's it.
Either you're nobility or you're not, like that kind of.
And for he might very well fucking inherited that notion from the British in the first place.
Yeah, well, that's why I think the colonization of India was so successful, is because we had a very similar class and caste system, and they kind of overlapped. And I think the British probably utilized that.
Sure.
To do that.
To their advantage.
To their advantage, yeah.
And so your grandfather was a big part of that, of colonizing India. That's nice.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it? Well, actually, his mother was Indian.
Wow.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that.
Yeah, so she was Indian and came back over with his father and passed as white.
Wow.
Yeah, so
in the same way that I try to be British passing.
She was from... I want to say Lucknow.
Okay, yeah, like up north.
And it was actually really renowned for courtesans and the colonial British going there for that reason. So, there's a whole, and we don't know much about her. So I think there's probably a whole traumatized history there too.
Are you saying that are you suggesting that she might very well have been?
Yeah.
At least the daughter of.
Oh.
Probably. Yeah.
This is so fascinating. So you have
I'm the child of
an
felons, if that makes you feel
Indian genetics.
Thanks, Russell.
You're like an 8th Indian. Is that true?
Yeah.
8th.
Yeah.
8th.
I mean,
right. Probably there's some Middle Eastern DNA in there as well. Because Lucknow is...
In America, that would have put you in one of the segregated schools, so that's something.
Yes, that would definitely determine my class level over there.
Would.
That'd be really interesting to do one of those DNA swab.
Yeah,
things.
we did one. We did one. Yeah, actually, weirdly, I wasn't that fussed, but my husband really wanted to do it, so we did it, and mine did have 1% Indian. Genetics.
Yeah.
But my mother's mother was from Ireland, so most of it seemed to be from there.
Oh yeah.
And they were tribal, and that could be they were tribal kings and queens, so they could track it all the way back to really, really early on, which was quite
cool.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Harmony is 80% Scottish.
I have a lot of Scottish.
It is. It's true. I'm not exaggerating. It's
well, the Scottish and Irish DNA is very similar because they married a lot, so it I have a lot of Scottish too.
You find in the colonies that we're quite kind of obsessed with our genealogy out of insecurity, I think is what you call
it. Well, I get it because it's that huge move of people from one place to another.
Yes.
that huge migration. It's looking for roots, isn't it? Whereas I always felt really that my roots are here, very much.
And we're over there. My ex-wife's father used to say about the Americans, especially during the war, that the Americans were the Yanks, oversexed and over here. It's a nice little expression to remember from the old days, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, my grandfather's sister actually moved to the States when she was 15.
Oh, wow.
On her own.
That's very young.
Really young, with a drama company. And never went back. So I've got American cousins on the West Side.
Wow. You have quite that's really amazing that, like, from your grandparents, those were your mother's parents?
Yeah.
So then they had 2 children that were quite eccentric, would you say?
Yeah. Oh, yes. My grandmother and my mother and my aunt. Yes.
Yeah.
They're the offspring of the Lord.
Yes. Lord Moore. Yes.
Well, that figures that they would have quite a hard time of it.
Yes. I think it was, they're very different, my mum and my aunt, and they reacted very differently to their upbringing, and it was incredibly privileged. It was incredibly privileged upbringing. And they were in Singapore for about 5 or 6 years, because my grandfather was the High Commissioner of Singapore. So they had like amas who washed them and bathed them and things.
Wow.
And just they called them their amas. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like mothers.
Yes, basically.
That's so amazing.
In absence of.
My mom took that as her grandma name. She said she wants everyone to call her Amma because she'd been to India once.
She liked that name.
She liked it.
Wow.
Nice.
Being what do you call it, an expat or colonial in Singapore is even more fucking privileged than being posh in Britain. Like that's quite a big difference, or in scale.
Yeah, really big difference, and kind of interesting because, like I said, they weren't aristocratic, so they didn't have a lot of money, and the income isn't. You don't get paid a huge amount of money. You get paid like a civil servant, but you don't have any costs. There are no living costs. Everything else is paid for, and you live in wherever beautiful house that you're given to live in, where you need to be, with servants,
with the amas.
with the amas, yes, bathing them at 15 years old.
Wow,
that was weird.
Yeah, that was a really interesting experience I had, actually. Like at a Kerala ashram, an Ayurvedic ashram, and every morning for like, I don't know, I think we were there for maybe a week. You're getting these Ayurvedic treatments. And so you'd be on the table and, in Ayurveda, you're like wearing nothing basically, right? Like, I mean, nothing really. And then after the treatments, there'd be like a servant girl there and she'd like scrub you down and like wash you like a baby. And I was an adult, and I was like, this is really fascinating and bizarre and weird.
Yeah, with that funny rough salt as well, that like scrubbing stuff that's quite abrasive, and
she's just like picking up your arms and like you're just like, there was 2 of them actually, and you're just like, oh, okay, I'll just sit here and pretend that I'm an object.
Was that the one that went kind of a bit rapey?
Yeah, that was the.
Really? What the girls washing you?
No, the girls were fine, but the doctor was. He was a
rapist.
Yeah, I'm gonna say. Yeah, I don't know.
That's not good, is it? That's not very cleansing in a.
Didn't feel exactly healing. Let's just put it that way.
No,
it felt a little bit like the other side of healing.
Expanded on your spectrum of
sort of traumatizing me.
Come retreat, get traumatized.
Right? And also you're like in the jungle and there's like no one around, and so there's nowhere to go even. There's nothing to do. You're like trapped there. Like,
what did you do? Stuck it out?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then left and reflected on my experience and thought
it wasn't so different from the rest of your time in India, to be honest. It's the whole thing's kind of a bit rapey.
The whole thing's a little bit rapey, but I was like, I'm not sure that was a good recommendation. I don't think I'll be recommending that to anyone.
And yet you continue to recommend people go to India.
I'll go to India, but not that particular.
It's
carry your
sort
stick
of
with you.
Parcel of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Huh. Back to the interview. So about your
talk
atrocious.
about you.
Let's talk about you. And what do you think happened to your mom's a bit difficult? What do you think happened to her that was so? I mean, she, as you said, maybe we didn't say it on the interview yet, but you said that, for example, in the bio that you sent us, that you left quite early. You left when you were 12 because you'd had just about enough of it. And I wonder if you could set that up for us. Like, what was it? What was she like? How do you think she came out that way?
Well, my grandmother used to slightly brag, but also slightly confess that she broke my mum's will at the age of 2.
Oh my God.
It's a terrible thing to say, but she was very fearful. And my mum used to tell me that even at 7 years old, she would walk to the shop and she'd say to herself, am I really here now? Am I really here now? And after 7 times, she wasn't here anymore. So from a really young age, she was trying to escape her body for whatever reason. And I think my grandmother probably picked up on that. And my grandmother, who is was very in her body and came from Irish background and quite Catholic probably at some point. They weren't at that point. I think that terrified her. I think having a child that she didn't understand and couldn't control terrified her. And she then just took control of her. But then my mum continued to find ways to escape.
Right.
So kind of disassociate.
So disassociate, and just want to be elsewhere in fairyland, fantasyland, wherever it was she could go. She wanted to go there.
Do you think she was experiencing some kind of trauma, or do you think it was
fake harm?
No, but like
I think that
did she ever talk about anything like that, or no? It was just really
not at a young age. No, I think it was in her nature. I think her nature was to be able to go into that very otherworldly space and be very disconnected, and that then set up a battle between her and her mother, which lasted the lifetime.
Her mother wanted her to be like present and grounded and like
and
not imaginative.
I don't think it was not imaginative. My grandmother was really wild and creative and funny. I think she was afraid of that otherworldliness of whatever that was. And also my grandmother was naturally very controlling. So she also wanted to control it. And that was something that she could see that she couldn't control. You know, if someone's able to disassociate from themselves at that young an age, I can understand. I think I'd find that quite scary if my child was doing that so powerfully at such a young age. And then, that desire to control her then became a fear because my mother repeatedly found different ways to escape that control. And so she then became very fearful that it was going to end badly. And so they got in this really awful relationship where they were very codependent and playing on guilt and shame between each other a lot. And, you know, I think it was really painful, but also my mother now just has nothing but wonderful words to say about her and how much she misses her and all of that. So,
It's funny how you can have a mom be a good enough mom for one child, but kind of just not have the right chemistry, not have the right disposition for another child. And, you know, it's just sometimes it's just not the right mix.
Yeah, although I don't think my aunt would say she was quite the right chemistry for her either.
Yeah, considering she ran away at like 15 to America.
So that was my grandfather's sister, but my mother's sister ran off with her then to be husband when she was about 15.
Wow.
16.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he was in like Deep Purple or Twisted Sister.
He was Genesis. It was Peter Gabriel she married. So
what?
She broke up the band. No. Well, we'll look her up on the computer.
No, the eagle on Solsbury Hill broke up the band.
That was Jesus Christ. Come on, it was Jesus. It's Jesus. Jesus came down to Solsbury Hill.
That's amazing.
Jesus.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So funny.
We could talk all about Solsbury Hill, but I think that's probably a bit of a departure.
You know, I can see it from my window. My window, yeah.
God.
So.
The beauty of that song is this kind of like walking around, says Sussex, and thinking about how off-putting an evangelical experience of Jesus Christ would be to the working man of Britain. It's like, what are you fucking on about?
Yeah. What do you know about the working man of Britain? Schoolboy.
What does Jesus know about the working man of Britain? Fuck off. And it's just like, that song it makes perfect sense in America, because every fucking idiot has an evangelical experience of Jesus here. But like in Britain, no one does that.
It's so beautiful.
No one fucking experiences Jesus Christ in all his beauty. You know? But here it's like I was like fixing a fence with your uncle, and he stopped for a moment to tell me about the majestic presence of Jesus in his life. It's like, fuck off, Dave. Can we just fix the fucking fence, man? I just want to fix the fucking fence. We've been out here 4.5 fucking hours. I don't want to hear about fucking Jesus Christ. I'm a fucking Jew. Would you fucking stop? Pardon, that may have got a bit loud.
A little bit too much. A little too much.
Oh, that's so funny.
The drama of it all.
Yeah.
God damn it. I'm fucking Jewish. But I'm not even that Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. You're Hindu-ish.
No, when I was 12, I converted to Presbyterianism, which is a Scottish Jesus cult.
When you were 12?
And I was quite lonely, and they were quite nice, and they fed me. My mom wasn't. She listens to the show, but she was not feeding me. You understand? So they offered free food and old ladies. I was like, oh my God, please! This is what I needed. It fills the gaping hole in my heart. An old lady with food. Oh, help me, Lord. Help me, Jesus. And they were very really nice and posh in their way, and they were, fancy, Presbyterians, and
shoes and dresses and
shoes and
scarves.
I used to dream of shoes and dresses. Used to dream of socks. Used to dream of socks. Couldn't imagine having socks. These old ladies were so nice, and so I gave up. I didn't know that I was Jewish at the time, but I gave it all up for Jesus.
He didn't know he was Jewish.
No one tells you in Illinois that you're Jewish, because that's how you could get hurt.
Yeah. That's funny you say that. It reminds me of when my mum went into treatment a couple of times, or 3 times, and I would go and visit her, and they had the most amazing cakes. Amazing cakes. And orange, like this orange drink on like tap. and you could have whatever you wanted. And I loved it. I loved it so much.
You're
I
like,
get really excited about going to the treatment centre. My mum was being looked after, and there was all this food that I could eat, and
this was good. You got it good in here, Mom.
It was pretty cool. I thought it was
the orange pop.
Yeah, it was a good place.
But
I didn't convert. I didn't convert to alcoholism to join the gang.
No,
convert to alcoholism.
So, how many times your mom was put in a treatment center for her addiction to alcohol?
Yeah, so
other things.
They were the kind of posh addiction centers, you know.
Nice.
You pay to go, and
with the cakes and the orange
with
drinks.
the cakes and the orange pop. And I don't remember exactly how old I was when she went in. I just and what exactly happened, I don't know whether it was her choice or her parents kind of said, you know, you got to go. Or my dad was saying you got to go. I don't remember, but she got thrown out the first 2 times. She got thrown out because they really. She snuck off to go for a drink with someone.
Gosh. Yeah.
I think both times. She just snuck off to the pub somewhere, and it's so funny because comparatively, she wasn't. I don't want to say she wasn't a real addict, but she could kind of take it or leave it. You know, she didn't have to. She thought the whole thing was kind of a joke. It was quite a little performative at times, I think. And so they just thought, oh, we don't know what to do with you. This isn't going to work. You're not going to do our statistics any good.
Well,
but I know that. You go ahead. I have loads of them.
Well, no, but it's interesting because I feel like in England as in Canada, it's such a part of the fabric of our culture, you know, drinking, and even, the Queen's mother, right? She was like
a gin and tonic a day.
Yeah, like, and it was very much, even my great grandmother would have her like glass of sherry every day as her nightcap. And you know, not that she was getting ragingly drunk or anything, but it's very much
the rages came when you didn't drink.
A part of sort of normal life, I feel like, in our cultures, and not really frowned upon as like something negative or bad. Right? So it's sort of a tricky thing because it's very social and very much accepted as the norm, but also it can turn bad.
It's social and it's ritualistic, isn't it? And I think like my grandparents both did that. Had a drink at lunchtime. It was always the same drink, and always had the same drink in the evening. And then, but when my grandfather retired, he was definitely an alcoholic. You know, he'd sit with one of those giant bottles of wine next to his seat, and you know, he'd put a shot of gin in a pint of bitter and things that were just like really outrageous. And I think, my mum's definitely an addict, but I feel like there are different types of addicts. I think there are different types of addiction too.
We had a conversation with our friend from Ohio,
Taylor
Hunt, and we were talking about the same topic, about different types of addicts. And you know, I'm a Coke baby and the child of alcoholics, and but I also don't really think they're real addicts, because they could take it or leave it. They both stopped cold turkey, and with no problem. They stopped smoking with no problem. Though they could also take enormous quantities of drugs and alcohol, like that would kill a horse. And I discovered late in life that I could as well, which is a surprise to me. But at the same time, we were talking to Taylor. It's like, no, you guys are normies, aren't you? I was like, I was offended. I was like, fuck you, I'm not a normie. It's like, I'm a fucking Coke baby. It's like, no, you're a normie, because if I take a sip, I'm fucked. I wake up 3 days later with, whores and track marks. It's like, oh, right. Yeah. Okay. That's, you cannot stop once you start. And so, there is this spectrum and range. And,
but I think, I think there's like, just to your point.
I want to finish.
Okay. Finish your point.
I think I got to make a transition now, but, I think what we're talking about is a kind of mindset, and what that mindset does to our friends and family. And for example, you mentioned this word outrageous, and I think it speaks to a kind of peculiar view of boundaries that the alcoholic family and the children of alcoholics live with. Is like the alcoholic sits there in their chair and says things that they really shouldn't, and the children grow up thinking that what's right can be just about anything, and that's a real problem. And so, for example,
what's normal is very much anything as well.
Normative behavior is outrageous, and that can create problems, a lot of problems, when you go out into the world. And for example, like it
also creates a lot of solutions as well.
My childhood trauma is put on performed display for our podcast. So, for example.
No, but it is. I mean, that's kind of fascinating. I mean, it creates some maybe loose boundaries or places where judgments are not critical, maybe. But that can also be helpful in our society too, to be in a non-judgmental place, right? Not judging everyone as right or wrong or good or bad or all that, right? You're just like, yeah, it is what it is.
But Lucinda, maybe you could tell us what you're living with.
Because you did some research on this, which I think is fascinating, which I'd love to hear about what you observed.
Yeah, so I did, and it was really interesting because I think I never really thought of myself, even though my mother was definitely an alcoholic and is still an addict and is addicted to very high prescription painkillers. I never thought of myself as traumatized. I knew that I was affected. I knew that it had impacted my life, but I didn't think that was trauma. That seemed like a big word to me. It seemed like something for someone who had a lot more trauma.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think you guys have mentioned it a few times on the podcast about ACEs, about adverse childhood experiences, and how children of alcoholics or addicts of any kind are way more likely to have experienced many of those. And obviously that leads to all sorts of social, neurological, behavioral issues later in life, and physical development. It can hinder physical development. And looking at that list and realizing, oh yeah, I can answer yes to 5, definitely, maybe more. So therefore you're classified as trauma, and there are these 2 types of trauma, which are complex and I can't remember the name of the other one. But complex is where it's repeated trauma, so you experience it over and over again. And the other is developmental, so that it's in the early years, so it affects your development. And I could really see that those traumatizations had an effect on myself and the way that I lived in the world. And in speaking to other children of addicts and researching it, those are quite archetypal or stereotypical effects. So, I mean, on the surface level, there's depression and loneliness and themselves being much more likely to fall foul to addiction, but also very self-critical, high level of self-criticism, feeling like you can't share your voice, you can't speak up, you're not going to be heard, not trusting people or others, being at times self-destructively self-reliant, and all these sort of things that really rang true and familiar. And I was like, wow, okay, yeah, that makes sense. but mainly because those things are all mainly because in your closest system of belonging, you go to the place to find safety and you find danger. You go to the place to find compassion and you find disconnection. So those things that are taught when you're contempt many times in those very early years, what those words mean, they're completely screwed up in your system. You have no idea what those things mean, and they mean the opposite to what they're meant to mean. And so the complexity of it was interesting, and also speaking to other people, hearing them having the same experiences of those things was also, for the first time, me going, so there are these other people, because that's the other thing, is it's this silent thing, isn't it? I think every single child of an addict will say that there is a complicity of silence. It doesn't matter how much of an obvious addict they are, or how obvious it is to anyone else. There's this complicity of not saying it, or not talking about it, or not acknowledging it to anyone, and you've just kind of got to get on with it. And again, that's why it's dangerous that there aren't these boundaries. There is this spectrum, and that's how it works, because it's all right until it's not all right.
Exactly.
And you don't say anything because it's kind of okay and everything's all right, and then suddenly, it's not okay anymore.
Suddenly it's
okay. I think, and for me, that was when we moved from London to Bath. My mum and I moved from London to Bath.
It's a wonderful zoo in Bath.
In Bath?
Love that.
A zoo?
Bath. A zoo, yeah. It's the Lord Bath. The Lord Bath.
Oh, Longleat. Yeah.
Longleat. My favourite telly is the Longleat zoo show. It's a zoo show. I used to watch it every morning after practice.
And the guy, Lord Bath, who lives in Longleat, has like 7 or 8 wives or something.
As you should, if you're going to have that much money, you should provide.
Have your own zoo and multiple wives.
Yeah, if you can afford it, and those women need looking after as well.
Yeah, that's why he's got all those tigers.
Is he Anglican or Mormon?
I don't know.
The wives? No, it's just if you have the money, you should provide. That's all it is.
All right, back to addiction.
Longleat.
So we moved to Bath, which was near my mum's sister, and I mean I think it'd been quite bad in London, but when I was 7 when we moved to Bath, and you don't really know any different, so you kind of think it's okay. And then we moved to Bath, and we lived with my aunt for a while and my cousins, and I was very aware that this is a very different living situation than I had. And then I got into a private school, so I was surrounded by lots of kids who seemed like parents very normal, and yes, it was different. And then my dad moved from Oxford to Bath, so he was nearby, and that meant that I had a kind of get out. So I would come home from school at say 4:00 in the afternoon. My mum would often be asleep, and I'd have to go to the co-op and buy my own dinner and make my dinner and things like that. And after a while, then I would call my dad and he would come pick me up and I could go and stay there. And that recognition that there was another space where I didn't have to cook my own dinner and someone else washed my clothes and did those sort of things meant that it became more difficult to enjoy the space that wasn't okay. And
very familiar story.
Yeah, so I'm very lucky she moved to Bath, and I'm very lucky that my dad moved as well, because I feel like that's one of the main contributing, when they look at how being the child of an addict affects adults. There are a few major contributing factors. One is that we're born with a certain amount of resilience or hypersensitivity. And, if you're born with a bit more resilience, then you've got your foot in the door a little bit. The next is if you have a stable adult in your life that's able to provide some kind of support alongside class and education and support systems that are available to you outside of your family system. But those two are the main things. And I feel like I had those. So I had that ability to say, this isn't okay, and I prefer this, and I had somewhere to go. So at 12, I sort of went, I think I'll go and live. It was only across the park, you could walk there in 10 minutes, but yeah. That was,
I'd always kind of wondered why my father had misshapen ears, and they always sort of seemed a bit weird to me. I never kind of really asked about it. And I was in the car with him last month in Detroit, and he said, "Yeah, I would just go to school by myself and find food wherever I could, and I didn't have a cap, and my ears got frostbite, and the pieces of them broke off." It's like, what was Grandma at work? No, she was just always asleep. I said, right, yeah, and she was a full blown alcoholic, crawling to the door to. My mother tells me this story all the time. I don't know. I don't know how this works. She would crawl to the door to open it up so that men could come in to have sex with her.
Oh,
and I was like, I don't know
so sad.
This whole
I feel like that's a saying, but like a terrible one.
A what?
Like a saying, not a reality, but a terrible one.
A saying? Do people say that?
maybe child addicts have their own sayings.
every home has their own saying. This is the kind of thing they say in the Slater family. But it's like, I could tell you 10 more different examples of the same kind of situation of just neglect, and not having a good enough mom has this repercussion across generations. And then you have a child who's kind of got one foot in either, as you said, one foot in the door, one foot out, and is able to make a step towards a responsible adulthood, which is kind of where you are, and probably you're probably a bit stronger and a bit further ahead than Harmony and I.
I don't know about that.
We see your flag, Lucinda, and we're chasing it. We're following up the hill after you. But,
I do know, and I don't know what your guys' experience of this is, but I do know that even though I started going out and drinking from quite a young age and too much, and did that for too long, there was never any question in my mind that I would end up an addict. I just knew I did not have that in me. And I think, like you were saying, that that your parents had this capacity for drugs and alcohol, and my mum has that. She has that capacity of, you just think, God, how have you consumed all that? I don't have that. I will, no. No, I will be sick before, I get really sick before I can.
That's helpful.
Yeah, I have that too.
That's really helpful.
Really
to have
helpful.
That.
Yeah.
Because it actually is a boundary that you don't personally have in your personality. But if you can get sick, it's like, oh, I should stop then.
Yeah. Well, you kind of have
I'm
to
the same.
normally.
I vomit very easily.
But you can take a bunch more.
Yeah.
Keep going afterwards. I would never keep going afterwards.
It's quite funny though, what drug you have a capacity for and what you don't. So Harmony and I have no capacity for psychedelics. Psychedelics turn us into terrified little children. Whereas
they make me vomit.
And vomit, panic. And so I always assumed I was a lightweight because all I took were psychedelics growing up. And it was like, I was, really close to becoming one of those schizophrenic young men, because like it's too much. Whereas I didn't discover until I was like 40 that I could drink as much as I wanted and then like after 30 minutes be stone cold sober.
I feel like you are.
I think you are.
No, it's like, I was in Provence in the south of France, and I was like, I've told this story in the podcast before, but I was in the death throes of my marriage, and I was ready to move on, and I just said fuck it, and I never said fuck it before, I'd never allowed myself to say fuck it. And so I just started,
you weren't a big drinker growing up.
Never.
No.
Because I knew that my parents were alcoholics.
I was.
And you were a serious drinker from the age of 12.
10.
10.
Maybe not serious at 10, but definitely.
Like a fucking bottle of vodka is serious. But
That's quite serious.
But like 10 in the morning, like all night, and I would just keep drinking, and like without, like 30 minutes later, like I'm sober again. Okay, what do I do? I have to keep drinking.
You need to get into the hard stuff.
Yeah. Drinking wine in France is just like drinking water. It's not
just
real drinking.
Just like, yeah, it's not really drinking.
But you gotta start getting into like some gin.
What do you have a vast capacity for alcohol, but then you're like cheesing it now. You're saying like no, I throw up. Like,
I do if I drink too much.
But you will fucking drink. But you can drink a lot under the table.
Yeah, I can actually.
Yeah. I mean,
that's because my liver's conditioned.
You did your 7 years. It's back on form.
But what isn't conditioned is your self-critic and your inner critic. Like that's not conditioned at all, is it?
No, that's it. That comes out in full force. That's every day,
every morning.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that.
Even with all the personal development work, it's still there.
But that's the thing. Like that's what kind of at the heart of our conversation, Lucinda, is that all three of us pursued personal development. And I'd like to hear more about what you and your dad got up to, which sounds fascinating. A little culty, but we all sort of pursued these cults out of kind of, I think, because we made the choice to pursue cults because Al-Anon, wasn't available to us, and I think we found adult children of alcoholics in our Ashtanga community. Mm-hmm. And that was our succor, our community, our Sangha became a way for all of us to kind of redress our trauma histories. Would you agree with that assessment? Is that unfair?
Yeah, I definitely, I don't know actually, because I feel like I was looking for something from a very young age. I feel like, and I said this a little in my bio about my dad. My dad had a strong meditation practice as long as I can remember, and was always talking about esoteric things and having those kind of conversations. So it was always in my background.
Yeah, he was like, he reminds me of like this like hippie of the 60s, like into transcendental meditation and like all of these like interesting like kind of, I don't know, like you're saying, he was mystical experiences and stuff.
Yeah, he was like a real control freak hippie. Because he did acid once and it was the most awful, traumatizing experience of his life. And then his first wife was a heroin addict.
Oh, wow.
She died and he had to go and get her body out of wherever she died from. And she was my mum's best friend.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow. So
delicious.
Yeah, right.
That explains a lot.
Just like, wow. And he was always, and he's very intelligent, very academic, and so he always had this he was a hippie, but he wasn't that kind of loose with it, I don't think.
He was a hippie like my mom's a hippie.
It was very he was very determined and very, he worked really hard at his meditation practice, and it was a really it still is very long, traumatic and wonderful thing, but I feel like he was a hippie, but not in that very free love.
Not in the drugs way.
The rest of everyone else around him was.
But I can see it. I can see that. Like,
You can sort of put your you can create a kind of category of hippiedom by which Beatle you like the most,
Right.
and that's where you land. The hardcore heroin addicts can stay with John Lennon.
With John,
The kind of meditators go with George.
Yeah.
The kind of dopey, smokers go with Paul.
Yeah.
With Ringo.
Ringo, you're just wearing the clothes.
So your dad was with George. And you started joining him.
I think I was told my whole life by my whole family how exactly like my dad I was.
Oh,
which I took as a great compliment because I thought at least I'm not like my mum.
Right.
And, he was this kind of savior. It was not meant as a compliment. I see now that it was. Well, my mother, I knew it wasn't a compliment, but my mother's family as well used it quite freely in the same way.
That's so funny.
Oh, man.
You're like, yeah, I'm doing good.
Yeah, doing great. So hit me again. So I kind of felt very akin to him, and we had the same ideas about things and the same kind of thought processes and stuff, which happened naturally. I think I don't feel like he pushed it on me at all. I just sort of gravitated towards it. But at the same time, he's my dad, so I didn't really want to do what he was doing. I wasn't
right,
and I was quite lost. I think I was after school was quite lost, and just that self-criticism thing that we're talking about. For me, and for lots of children addicts, it works to push them to a high level of achievement. And I know, yourself, Harmony, have said how that's worked for you. And for me, it didn't really work. Yeah.
It works till it doesn't. Right?
Until it doesn't. It didn't. It really stagnated me. I really, I felt it didn't matter how well I achieved at something. It didn't really push me in a direction or to do more of that thing. I just kind of undermined it very quickly after I'd achieved it. And so I felt after school, sort of all my friends went to university, and I think I took a gap year, and then I went for a term and dropped out and felt really bad about that, and was back at home, and I didn't know what to do. And my dad was always really supportive about, you'll work it out. Let's just work it out, just try different things. I did all sorts of weird stuff. But one of them was I did a psychotherapy training, and alongside that I did a training in something called family systems or systemic constellations, which is
systemic constellations. Yeah, that's in the notes.
Is a method.
That's a culty thing.
But that's
just the culty sounding things. It sounds weird.
Is it really family systems? Because that's really popular right now.
So it's family systems, and I was doing it. This is like 23 years ago or something.
And before it was popular.
Before it was popular, yeah. Before anyone really paid any money to do it, and
this is
now they made a whole movie about it.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the quote that was a red flag for me. Use the tool to constellate spiritual entities and ideas. Yeah. And I thought, that's okay.
That's weird, right?
Yeah. Let's get into that.
So it is really fascinating in that in the family. So if we start in the family situation, the way it works is a group of people come together, and now amongst them will be some issue holders who have come specifically to talk about something in their life that's not working out. And the constellator, who's holding the circle, will ask them to pick a few people from the group to represent members of their family and place them in space in relation to each other. Now, they have no knowledge of each other. They've never met each other before, no knowledge of the system. And somehow, when you do that and you place people in this constellation, they begin to experience feelings, words, thoughts, actions that are not their own. And I have never seen someone not experience it. I've never seen it not work on even the most kind of hardened, rigid, British, stiff upper lip person. I've never seen them unaffected by it. And you then work to put the system in a shape that serves to heal it. And that shape is usually based on an archetypal structure of the family being placed in order, where people's roles and positions are honoured and respected. And that's where I think, so it came from a Gestalt therapist who'd done a lot of Gestalt. And he also then spent a lot of time in Africa with witch doctors and tribal people, and the work that they do with their ancestors. And a lot of the, they'll line up images of their ancestral line and pay respect to it and all of this. So it's all quite, is quite weirdly linked.
So fascinating. Yeah.
And it's incredibly healing. I think if you're in the right space, I think it's not a therapeutic process. It's much more, I think, for people who've sort of gone through that therapeutic process and are still kind of stuck and still not being able to hold or feel free in their ability to love their family or themselves. And it's a really it's deeply moving and deeply beautiful, and I've seen all sorts of really traumatic things played out and worked and healed and done really wonderful things. So we'd both done this. My dad had done it and I trained in it, and he was working excuse me, as an organizational consultant and looking at brand identity and organizational identity from a spiritual perspective. So looking at a company's the divine energy behind a company that was trying to incarnate in the world.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah, so it was really amazing, and it's a beautiful framework. It's a really it's a beautiful way of looking at the world, that everything has this divine intention behind it that's trying to bring in some unique value to the world that's going to make it better.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And he was doing it for individuals as a kind of coaching tool, and he was also doing it for organizations. And we were using the constellation process to look at what might be blocking that divine force coming through. What is it that's standing in the way?
And that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's really, you should. It's so great. He's so good at it. And it's such a really, it's a lovely gift to be given, someone to show you, hey, look, this is you at your full divine potential. There you go. This is what you do in the world. Can you do it?
That's incredible. Is he still doing this? Is this what like his work, or is he doing something else now?
So he worked at it for so long. He's worked his whole life, at this. And he's now, what is he doing now? He is writing some research paper, and I'm not entirely sure what it's on, but it is based in that same process. But he works a lot with an organization called Ecocide, which are trying to put into place a law that makes it a crime to commit detriment to the environment, severe detriment to the environment. And
that's going to put most of our population in prison.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. But they're doing really good, and they're using that process quite a bit to look at how the decisions they make and what the best ways forward and stuff. And they're doing really well. It's really taking a bit of taking flight.
It's fantastic, because I can just imagining, I could just see an episode of Succession where this concept was brought into the room by Roman Roy with enormous contempt, and then Kendall is just sitting there like, what the fuck is going on right now? And yet these are the people that are in the most dire need of healing by
Spiritual
something
healing
that could allow them to respect their ancestors and their family. Like, there's just,
can you imagine what Logan would say?
fuck off, And they need it so badly, because that's part of what happens. You just start to have so much contempt for your family, and so much suspicion and so much cynicism that you can't barely get on in the world, because you just carry this intense inability to grapple with feelings.
And that system, it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how rich you are, how successful or anything, that system of origin, you are always going to try to belong to it. In whatever way you can, you are going to try to belong to it, even if it's fulfilling the role of not belonging. And you can't help it. And it's like that inner critic voice that doesn't shut up. You just learn how to move in spite of it. Whereas when you can see the system for what it is and the roles that have been played, and where everyone actually really wants to be in that system rather than where they've been placed by trauma, by whatever's happened, then it is incredibly healing. And it does affect the way you carry them in your heart, and the way you can feel love for them, and for other people and so on.
Yeah.
Oh, other people too.
Yeah, sometimes, occasionally, you know. If they impress you enough.
I'll put a pin in that.
So your dad and you are doing some of this like family systems work. How on earth did you like get immersed into this Ashtanga yoga community in air quotes?
Yeah. Community.
We're in the community, right?
Dysfunctional family could do a good constellation with the Ashtanga family community, couldn't you?
Right. That would be good. That'd be fascinating.
It would be super good. I was doing, so I think I said, I left university and my life felt very chaotic, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I felt really confused. And I was doing this bit of work with my dad, which was great, but I didn't really feel like it was going somewhere for me. And finally at 28, I went back to university, and I loved it. Like, I loved being a mature student. It was great, but I imposed this structure on myself, because I'd never in my life, I didn't know how to self-discipline. I just did not have that skill at all. And I knew the only way that this was going to be worth my time was if I learned that. And so I imposed this really strict structure on myself. And I didn't miss one single lecture. I didn't miss one single class. I did everything. I did all the reading. I was the really annoying mature student at the front of every lecture. Like, first time in my life. It was amazing. And during that time, I also started running and doing a lot of exercise. And it's like I was just finding all these ways to impose structure in my life and feel like I could organize the chaos in some way. And I did do that. And I did it quite successfully. And I was really, really proud of myself for a short time before I undermined it quite quickly. But towards the end of that, I started getting injured from a lot of running. And I thought, I should do some yoga. I know it's meant to be good for stretching, but I had a really adverse reaction to it. I felt like my impression was very love and light, and the kind of hippified side of it that I had quite a strong reaction against and didn't appeal to me. So I was doing it begrudgingly. And my only criteria when looking for a yoga class was that it was at 6 or 7 in the morning. Wow. Like that was it. I was like, I'm going to, and Bath isn't that big. There aren't that many yoga classes. And I found 2 classes that were at 6 or 7 in the morning. I didn't know they were both Ashtanga, but they were. And I looked at the kind of yoga. That's the only people who get up at that time to do yoga. And I looked at one website and I didn't like the picture of the people on that one. So I went to the other one. and it was so weird, because I went to this Mysore class, and I think it was in the sports centre, the one like the local sports centre, and it was quite busy. And I went and I got given my mat, and this lovely lady came and taught me the Surya Namaskar A and Surya Namaskar B, and I did them, and I was like, wow, this is really hard. And I quite liked it, because at first I thought, I don't want to give up one of my days running and doing to the gym to do yoga, because I really, I like sweating and all of that business. And that really appealed to me. And it really appealed to me that I was given a structure as well. She's like, right, we are going to do this, this, and this. You're going to do it now on your own, but there's a group of people here. So I wasn't completely on my own. That was quite nice. Right. And I had my own mat, and I was working on my own. I'm an only child, so I like to do things on my own. I'm not a very good team player. And then afterwards, she was like, okay, see you next week. So I went, okay. So I went back next week, and I couldn't go to the Thursday, so I went to the Friday. And the Friday was just the teacher in the room practicing on her own. And she goes, okay, you do your sun salutations, and then I'll help you as and when. And so I would just practice next to her for the next 6 months, and every 4 weeks or something, she moved me really slowly. I don't know if I was really, really bad at it, but she gave me one pose every month, even through standing and stuff.
You were doing it once a week, is that right?
I was doing it once a week, but I was applying my structure to it and my discipline and being very dedicated, and I learned everything. And I just gradually, I was like, I've been doing it once a week. I'll go twice a week. And then before I knew it, I was doing it 6 times a week, and, my life was over.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, when I met you in Bristol.
Yeah.
Back in 2016.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And how long had you been practicing since then, and where had your journey taken you?
I'd been practicing since 2012.
Yeah.
So 4 years.
I felt like it was pretty early on.
Yeah, it felt early on to me. And I think so. I'd been practicing with Alice in Bath, and I really it took me a long time to know that I was practicing Ashtanga yoga. And weirdly, before I took this class, about 6 months before, my dad's girlfriend at the time had shown me a video of Kino practicing. Right. And I just looked at it and went, I am never doing that. What the hell is that? Oh my God. And then obviously a year in, someone gave me a Kino McGregor book, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, that's that lady I saw doing that crazy stuff. And after 2 years of practicing, the teacher that I was with was running a teacher training. And I said to her, look, I really, really don't want to teach, but I really would like to know more, and I'd like to do some more study. And she's like, okay, so come and do it. But it turned out there were only 2 of us on the training, and she was running it as an apprenticeship. Right. So we basically ended up teaching her classes for a year. Right. That's pretty much what it was. And I was well aware that I was not in any way ready or qualified to be doing that.
Embrace the pyramid scheme.
Yes, exactly. And I got to the end of it, and I thought, I didn't really scratch the itch, and I wanted to go and find out some more. So I did. I went to Miami and did Tim and Kino's intensive there, and that was amazing. I mean, it was really great. It was so intense, and a real kind of. It felt like a baptism of fire. It felt, this is what it's about, and this is where I want to go, and how I want to proceed. And I came back, and while I was away, we'd moved to Bristol. So I then started. I was asked to assist and teach there a bit, and I stayed there for 2 years, and then we moved back to Bath. Yeah, and and I was teaching a little bit in Bath by then again. So we moved back here. And I started teaching, and I still feel like I'm not really ready to be teaching. Really, so I still feel like I have that slight imposter syndrome, and the more I learn, I'm that person who's the more I learn, the less I feel I know. And it's that experience of constantly just this huge thing that you're dealing with and working with.
It's interesting. I think a lot of us kind of fell into Ashtanga yoga because it was there, it worked on us. It did something for us. And as you said, we're looking for a very particular kind of experience that was structured, not cerebral, but physical. We could get into our body.
Seemed authentic. We're deeply critical, so we could kind of apply this what is it when you try and make a perfectionist attitude towards our own body, and we could just examine every single bit of ourselves that was wrong. We could fix it, try and fix it. But it might, but it was also just there, and it could very well have been taekwondo, or 40 years ago it might have been aerobics. And I want to try and get back to the heart of
what is it about our mentality that we then applied to Ashtanga yoga? What is that viewpoint? And
what do you mean, we?
The three of us.
Oh, like as children of alcoholics.
Yeah. I think for me it felt safe. Like I think that was a huge thing. Someone could show me the map, they could show me the poses, they could tell me that it was from this lineage over here in India and this is where it's from, and there's a big guy and he's in charge. And, you know, I was like, oh, okay,
Totally.
that's good.
That's how I felt too. What? He's still alive and he's in charge? Amazing. Yeah. I'm going there.
I totally understand that. I completely, and I had the same thought. But what is it about us that has that thought?
Like, what is it that's
lacking, isn't it? That's what's lacking in life. And I think you said it previously,
there's no
Russell,
big guy in charge.
It's a way out of the chaos. You've lived in this life where there's no boundary and there's no one. And also for me, certainly, my mother's story had always been my story. Like my mother's addiction or her sobriety or whatever it was, it doesn't matter if an addict is sober, they are still the center of the story. And for me, it was the first time that, and also on top of that, you have the added shame and guilt of actually speaking your own story. So you have these two things that are stopping you from ever being the center of your thought or experience. And you were given a mat and it has boundaries. And those are your boundaries. And it's about you, obviously, ideally, it has boundaries. And it's about you, but you don't have to talk about it to anyone. Yeah. You can get on your mat and you can look inside yourself and you can work things out for yourself, which is really nice because we like to be self-reliant. And yet there is someone there to move against and to talk with and to reflect if you need it. And hopefully they are a stable, sound, valuable
kindness.
presence.
Compassionate.
I think that creates, we seek out that stability and that system that we lacked. And Ashtanga, unlike other yogas, has that so strongly in place from the start. I really like to be told what to do. It relieves a whole lot of pressure from me. My husband hates it, absolutely hates it. Whereas I'm just like, please, someone tell me when to get up, when to eat, when to do this, when to do that. And it's easier. And the nice thing is because I'd been imposing that structure on myself for the past 5 years or something, then allowing it to be given from elsewhere was really nice. It felt like a real relief. But also, Russell, I think it appeals to our more negative qualities too, like you said, because it is a perfect opportunity to carry a lot of shame and guilt and self-criticize and self-flagellate and get rid of all of those kind of, and you can only do that for so long, I think, before you wind up a bit broken.
And and if you don't have that loving, compassionate presence of a teacher, and your teacher is someone who's like, do it again, that wasn't right, or incorrect method, or whatever, a little bit more critical, it reinforces a lot of negative critical patterns.
It creates a codependent relationship with that teacher.
Absolutely. Or they overstep their boundary and aren't stable and aren't able to provide support, actually, for whatever reason. And you can get into for me, it's very easy to become the stable, superior person in a relationship. That I'm used to that. Like that's good. I'm safe. I'm here. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. But soon that doesn't work either, because you don't want that. You want your teacher to be someone, like you say, who is guiding you in a very clean, loving, kind way. So I think, it's
so fascinating. Like, just reflecting on some of this, I was asked when I was teaching this last weekend about sort of, Mysore and Pattabhi Jois, and people are still very curious about this situation. And it's just like everything you're saying and just kind of reflecting on this, and I had said, like, anyone in the room, in my opinion, knew what was going on, that he was sort of touching women in ways that are now deemed inappropriate. At that time, it didn't seem so inappropriate.
It was cool.
Right? And so it's not like anybody's to blame for not saying something or not stepping up. It just never occurred to us that it was inappropriate. And then from our discussion, just sort of thinking about this, the room is full of children of alcoholics.
Every last
and like most of us have very, very undefined boundaries.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to grab my butt? That's okay.
Yeah. When I saw Patabi Joyce grab someone's crotch, which I saw, it was like, oh, that's okay. That's cool.
Okay, that's happening now.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
disassociated. I'm going back to my practice.
Like, I think that honestly, the room is majoritively.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Full of, children of alcoholics, like who grew up in environments that were chaotic
and your
unpredictable
reflex is to watch and stay alive.
Yeah. And so if you see something happening, you're not like, oh, I should stand up and say something. You're like, oh no,
that's not how you survive in that environment.
I'm gonna survive.
You don't go.
I'm just gonna watch. Okay, that seems weird.
You don't
but
confront the patriarch.
No one's dying.
Flipping out.
Yeah, but it's also belonging. You want to belong.
Yeah.
And if no one else, and if your elders aren't saying anything, your senior students aren't saying anything, then of course, because we want to belong, and you found this thing that is so precious and that you love. And I always thought when it all came out, I thought how devastating, because I'd had so many people say, he was like a grandfather or a father to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, if someone said that about my grandfather, if that came out, then of course I'm not suddenly going to go, oh yeah, sure, of course he was doing all that. I'm really sorry, that's terrible. I'd just be torn apart, and you wouldn't believe it, and you'd defend him, and you'd want it not to be true.
But even if you saw it happening, that's the thing.
Absolutely.
Even if you saw it happening,
it
never went in.
Yeah.
Because it just, I think it was just like I think we just weren't equipped.
No.
And I think also because of the family history that I'm going to say 90% of the people in that room came from at the time.
And at that time, we're talking about 200 people.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like
different. I think it's different now, right?
People. It's quite different now.
Yeah.
But
it's serious punks.
Yeah. At that time, it was addicts, recovering addicts, and children of addicts.
Alcoholics, yeah.
That's who was in that room.
Yeah.
And I think, it's funny because I think when I went to Mysore for the first time, I've only been twice, but part of me was kind of disappointed, because I think I thought that I would find people who were more like me and more kind of, and it really didn't feel like that now. It felt like a privileged space,
that's exactly right. It turned to that from a punk space to a privileged space, which is, what do they call that in
gentrification?
Gentrification.
That's the word. Mysore became gentrified.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it did.
Yeah.
It went from artists and punks and then it turned into a kind of middle class environment with people enjoying a latte.
Yes.
Literally.
Literally.
Yeah.
It's so hard to explain. I mean, I feel like we were kind of at the tail end of that generation, Russell and I.
Well, 2003. I mean, really,
but really, because by 2007, people had cell phones and Wi-Fi and laptop computers. But when we first went, there was no Wi-Fi. There was no smartphones.
You had
there was
a deck
no
of cards. That's
there was no almond milk. There was no chocolate. There was nothing.
You had a cold bath. And you walked Rashal on the snow.
I mean, I remember bringing I tell people this. I emptied a bunch of craft dinner packages into Ziploc bags and brought noodles with me Because you couldn't even get noodles. You could only get Indian food.
On earth would you do that? You could eat the Indian food.
No, you
Eat
just
the
want
fucking food.
No.
Get a fucking dosa and eat the fucking dosa.
I dreamt about dosas last night. I just remembered.
After 3 months, you're just like, I just want
no, I want
dinner.
a fucking
I just want
idli and a
comfort
dosa.
food.
I don't want comfort. I want a fucking.
I do.
Jesus,
I get tired of Indian
you
food.
Hate Indian food.
I get so tired of it.
Oh, I do.
Anything if it lasts very long. That's the problem.
Too much
I like it for a while. It's true.
You're a chaos agent.
I am. It's my comfort zone.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? I was thinking about that too, actually, about that. Like that, some of us have that chaos comfort zone, and some of us, I used to think that was my comfort zone, and then I was like, actually feeling safe makes a lot more things possible for me. I'm much more able to function if I feel safe and organized. But it doesn't come naturally. So I have to really work at it. And it took a long time for me not to feel like chaos was what made something attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and I think some people
feel safe in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like familiar. It's familiar.
Yeah.
Maybe not safe, but it's familiar.
Yeah, that's quite a common result for children of addicts, is that they do confuse pleasure with pain.
Yeah.
Seek out pleasure through painful experiences.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most inappropriate jokes that I have in my back pocket is that
great.
I moved to New York September 1st, 2001. And then a week later, the buildings fell down. And that's how I knew I was home.
It's like, yeah, man. Welcome to New York.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Fantastic. This is clearly where I meant to be. Yeah.
Chaos.
Awesome.
Chaos.
Awesome sauce. I want to talk to you a bit about this is a point that I want Harmony to take back with her. I want her to learn this from you about the shadow side of Ashtanga yoga for you, which I think is really a systemic failing. That to do this properly, you have to get up at 3 a.m, practice, teach, find something to fucking do all day, and then go to sleep at 6. And how that resulted for you in Addison's disease. And I wonder if
not
you can...
Quite.
Not you, Harmony, but her. And I wonder if you can tell us about this and how it doesn't work for us.
Actually, I found that really, really interesting. I do want you to talk about this also, because I also have very, I'm just going to say weak kidneys. I've had kidney infections like 5 times in my life, like serious, almost died from one. It's really not a strong space for me in my body.
Because I nearly died too from my kidney infection.
Fucking sleep, ladies. Fucking get some sleep.
Yeah. So tell us what you learned about getting up at 3 a.m. for you.
What you learned is stop fucking doing that.
Well, I say that I still get up at 4:30. I feel like that's like
I wake up every morning at 3 a.m. and drink water and go back to sleep.
You go back to sleep? Oh, you see, if I wake up at 3, I can't get back to sleep. That's my problem. And then I'm just like,
I've taught myself.
Get up.
Go to bed.
Yeah.
Stay asleep.
I wake up at 3 and I drink water and I go, it's not time to get up now. I drink a whole cup of water.
Whole cup? That's amazing.
Like 16 ounces. And then my stomach's really full. And then I'm like, you can't get up and do anything. You have to lie here and wait to digest your water. You have to go to sleep. And then I go back to sleep.
I need to learn to do that.
Try the water.
Yeah, I'll try the water. Because normally I have to get up to pee. And then I'm like, well, I'm up now. Might as well.
Pee, then drink the water. Then we'll go back to sleep.
Whatever you do, don't try.
That's my routine.
Okay.
I'm
doing
Just stay asleep. So tell us all about how
women have a more difficult time sleeping than men, typically. So
talk to my mom.
Especially
my mother has no problem sleeping.
Yeah, my mom has a good cure for that too.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think a lot, especially like for me, I got up at like 3 a.m. for 12 years of my life.
So the Case family has the kapha hard.
Yes. You guys can sleep through anything.
Eat kapha foods. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I think it did work for me for a little while, and I did it for about I don't know, 5-6 years, probably a bit more, maybe, I don't know. And there's a little bit of adrenaline that comes from it, and you feel kind of empowered by it, and you feel really strong because you did this thing in the morning before anyone else was even awake, and look at me, aren't I great? And I'm still smiling at the end of the day. And then
your day has to end at 4 p.m.
Yes, exactly. My day would end at 7. I would go to bed at 7. But then I had my son, and actually it worked really well because he was breastfeeding all night, and by about 2 a.m, after I'd been woken up 7 times, I was like, I cannot lie here anymore, and I'd just get up and I'd go and practice, and I'd come back to bed, and I felt great. It was great. I was like, at least I'm not lying in bed being tossing and turning and being clawed at every 5 seconds. So I would say until he was 2, that worked quite well, and it was nice, and it fitted my practice in, and it meant that I felt strong physically, and I was there for him still all the time when he needed me, and it was good. The problem was actually going back to work after 9 months. I found that teaching really draining after doing that. And that was a struggle. But then I stopped breastfeeding when he was 2, and gradually his sleep got a little better. But I think I was probably sleep traumatized a bit, because I would just wake up whenever he woke up, any movement, I'd be awake. Yeah. And I would continue to get up really early and practice before he got up. And then teach. And then teaching sort of got more. I built up a few more classes, and then I think what happened, and then I was starting to get really tired. I was starting to think, this isn't working so well. But I couldn't see another way. He wasn't that child that would sit there and play with toys while I, did second series. He'd last 2 seconds. And for me, doing it before he was awake felt like good parenting. Like, I'm not compromising my time with him for something that is essentially a solipsistic practice.
Right.
So I carried on doing it and having to do it quite early, because I was teaching at 6 in the morning. And it was getting really bad. I was getting to the point where every night before I went to bed, I was getting really tearful. I just felt really tired every day. I felt very trapped. I didn't know how to resolve it, and I really hate that experience of feeling that there's no answer. You can't do anything about it. And then Tim Feldman asked me to teach the online Mysore for Miami Life Center at European time. And for me, that was like, it felt very good, and like I really, really wanted to do it. I'd worked really hard, I felt, and practiced a long time, and it felt like, this is why I've done this. This is what I'd really like to do. But I remember saying to Duncan, I remember saying to my husband, I said, I really want to do it, but it just makes me cry every time I think about it. I think I don't know how it's going to work. And so I thought, I've got to try. And I tried, and I kept feeling really terrible, and kept feeling really, I was fine when I was teaching. I was fine when I was practicing. It was the rest of the day, just constant tiredness and emotional, very emotional every evening before I had to go to bed. And I went to the doctors and just said, look, I don't know much about anything to do with kidneys on a serious level, but I know that I have had past problems with my kidneys, and I'd just like them checked. So they do this test. It's a cortisol test, and they do it at 9 a.m. in the morning, because it's meant to be within a few hours of when you wake up, and it checks your cortisol levels. And they do it 3 times, and 2 of the times that they did mine, they were very high, and the other time it was kind of just below average. And the 2 times they did it was very high was when I'd got up at 3 or whatever and practiced, and then
silly o'clock.
and then gone and taught. So they then send you for this test that tests for Addison's disease. Now, I knew I didn't have it. I knew I was looking at it. I said, I know that the reason this is happening is because of me getting up early and doing this thing that just isn't working. It's lucky I knew that because I had to wait 11 months or something for the test for my fatal kidney disease.
NHS will be the post anymore.
So it took me another couple of months, but I did finally. I just said, I said to my dad, I think, and I said to Duncan, I said, I can't do both. I don't know what to do. I have to just stop. So I spoke to Tim, and being Tim, he was really wonderful and supportive and kind and understanding. And it hadn't really taken off, the online Mysore anyway. I think it was at a time when, most people were heading back to practicing in person, or they'd already found their online community. So it was a bit of a strange time to do it anyway. And it was really hard. It was really hard to give up because I already had this internal dialogue of being a dropout from university, being a loser. And it felt like that was very high in my mind at the time. But I did stop, and I started just teaching once a week and practicing still before Gabriel gets up. So I still get up at 4:30, and that gives me a really nice space, which I feel is manageable. And I go to bed at 9. Doesn't feel too much of a compromise most nights. Yeah. Although I say that, and then this year that's sort of routine has all been shaken up by various things, and I've had to learn to be okay with that, and that's really hard for me. Practicing later and adapting around all sorts of different things. That is definitely hard for me, and it's definitely hard for me when I don't manage to do my full practice, or it's not good for me to do my full practice. I would much rather do it.
The counsel I'd like to give young teachers, especially who are struggling with the self-loathing for failing at being a Mysore teacher. And I have retired as a Mysore teacher myself. Is that the model, the archetype of the Mysore teacher that we're all aspire to is the pensioner who owns his own home, teaches in the basement of that home for people that come to him and pay him $400 a month each.
Yes.
That's the archetype. And so if your life situation doesn't match that, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Because if you don't own your home and you're renting your place for 1,000, 1,200 quid, and you need to teach 18 times a day, and you're exhausted and tired, and you have to practice to go back and make sure that you get your 5th Dan belt, back in Mysore, and then of course you need $10,000 to pay for that training, then the whole thing is going to death spiral for you and your energy levels. And it's like the same thing with like being an artist. If you're not the 5th son of Lord Bath, don't be an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was lucky to sort of know that from the beginning, having parents who'd worked very hard at non-fruitful, financially fruitful occupations, and
spiritually fruitful.
Yes. And I never. You're absolutely right, Russell. It's just to make money out of it, and especially where I live, which is saturated with all sorts of yoga and mostly kind of very comfortable yoga. It's a really hard sell, and it's not one that I wanted to make. And I'm not very good at that. I'm not very good at that. I love being in the Mysore room with people, and now I do it every Friday, and it's a fundraiser class, so all the money goes to charity each week, and that gives me a freedom from it, of attachment from it as well, and makes me feel a bit more relaxed about it. But I do think that it is so easy to fall into that idea of this is how it has to be, and there's like I've said, there's safety in that, and there's safety in that decision being made for you. And for me, allowing myself to make decisions that go against that is really important and also really hard. It's like that thing, it's still there. That voice is still there. I'm not sure that it ever won't be there, but I do it in spite of it rather than, and you keep.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Yeah. I think it's important though, right? You got those physical signs, those physical feedback that it wasn't working for you anymore. And I think, as women age, especially, I can only speak from a woman's perspective, but, and you have children and other responsibilities in your life. I mean, it's a very different time than when you're like in your 20s or your, even 30s and, you're single, you have no other responsibilities. Your body hasn't gone through those changes of like, giving birth, and then you're caring for a young one and all of the different things. And then later on, you're going through like major hormonal changes and shifts. And it's like a whole, it's like reverse puberty, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your energy levels are going to be different. Your capacity is going to be different. And that's just life. Like, you're just going to have to deal with it.
You just have to deal with
it. The same as when you're pregnant. You just have to deal with it. Like, your body isn't the same.
And interestingly, giving it up is not a problem. It's the fear of giving it up that's the problem.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So much, like before I got pregnant, I was like, oh my God, I won't be able to practice. And the second I was pregnant, I was like, oh, this is great. I can do what I want. And like, I had knee injuries for 2 years. And at first I was like, oh my God, I won't ever do Kundavasana again. And now I'm like, this is amazing. I don't have to do Lotus. I don't have to do Vajrayana. So now I've got this free card.
But you're like one of those amazing women that can do Kundavasana like in a Bakasana position.
Yeah, but I find that easier. I'm sure that's easier. You say it's harder. I'm like, no.
I think it's harder.
I think it's easier. But
it's to say the same, that having like enormous physical deformities has been such a blessing.
Yes.
That I when I go into my yoga room, I'm no longer just filled with fear and terror. Like, I just go in there and muck about, and it's nice. And I leave when Harmony says I have to make dinner. And it's like, okay. It's like, not like make breakfast.
No, dinner.
No, dinner. And it's really nice. And I don't, being retired is amazing.
I bet it is. I'd really like to retire. I kind of have retired.
No, I have a job, but like, I'm not a professional yoga teacher who's maintaining a standard.
And that's it too, isn't it? As you're teaching, you feel you need to maintain a standard, I think, because you feel you need to be there, be able to keep up and provide more information for your students and more support. And your practice is kind of part of that. But I definitely feel like that's true, that I've had torn meniscus in both knees, and it's been, I think, 2 years. They are getting kind of better, but I just feel like it's much nicer. I'm much nicer to myself than I used to be. And I do feel like, and the kidneys, actually, interestingly, the kidneys are related to fear. And I feel like for me, it's always been the fear of losing something that's so much worse than when it's lost. When it's lost, it's like, oh, okay, you can let go of it. It's gone. There's nothing you can do about it. The decision's made for you, but the stress.
The meniscuses are gone.
They're gone. You're not rebuilding them. It's very liberating, losing.
But the stress is in the anticipation of it, right?
And I think that's probably why my kidneys were so bad when I was doing too much, is it wasn't, apart from the actual stress that it would put on your adrenal glands to be having a distorted circadian rhythm and all of that things. I think it was that fear. I was so fearful of letting go of what I'd built and what I'd managed to pull together, even though it was really small, it wasn't a big thing at all. But I had done it. And I'd held on to it, and like, what was I going to do if I didn't have it? Yeah. And then within a week of not having it, I was like, I'm just going to sleep a little bit more. That's really nice.
Exactly.
Just be a bit of a nicer person.
Wait a second, I can
Yes.
sleep in. This is amazing.
I want to make sure just to make
sleep into 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
I want to make sure just that we have a fair and balanced podcast, that we kind of end on a nice note. I wonder if you could tell us though how the yoga's helped, because we've kind of just dressed it down and torn it to pieces. I wonder if
of course.
We still do it, and I don't know if it helps harmony at all, but I think it helps me. I'm not sure. And how has it helped?
Yeah.
And does it continue to?
It has definitely helped, I think, and it does continue to help. And I think there were two ways I have of looking at it. And one is that, you can do all the therapy you like, and that will help you intellectually understand all the shit that's happened to you and why it's happened. But you can't intellectualize it out of your body. And I think that asana really does do that. I think it helps release traumas that are tied up in your physical and neurological system. But also I think it helps you see yourself and your patterns on a daily basis in a way that is revealing, and you then find ways of overcoming or enduring or making easier, more peaceful. So I feel like it works that on a technical level that way. But I also feel like it, on a spiritual level, that daily commitment to seeking something bigger than yourself, seeking a connection to something bigger than yourself, frees up your attachments to the things that we tell ourselves are important every day, and allows love or anything to flow more freely through our systems and our bodies. And I feel like, and when I spoke to, when I was doing the research and I spoke to practitioners who were children of addicts, they did all say that they felt freely loving of their parents and forgiving. And I think that's miraculous and really amazing. And that's not to say that I don't have some very strong boundaries in place with my mum and that I get on with her, actually, even. We still have a really difficult relationship, but the love that I have for her can flow freely through my body and is absolutely able to go there. If she wanted to receive it, it would be there. And that, I feel, is a fundamental and a fundamental result of my yoga practice, combined with other things that I've done, but allowing love to flow freely through yourself and to others and the world.
I think that's really the most essential thing is if we're stuck self-loathing, it's because we're assigning ourselves to our purusha. We're saying, well, this shit cake of samskaras belongs to me. This whole fucking story that's disgusting that I've been assigned to, as long as I allow it to be me, then I'm going to be full of self-hate, and I'm going to hate everyone that created this situation, Russell Case. And but understanding that our true identity is the observer, watching a reality television, then you can sort of fall and just be in love with this, and be in love with the actors, and have empathy for them. And like, oh, poor Kendall. Poor Logan.
Poor Kendall.
Logan's also really struggling, isn't he?
Yeah.
Fucking hell. And then you just go, then the show ends and you go back to the eternity of unconsciousness. and merge back into the void and quite happily move on to the next one. It's good next show. I'm excited for the next show after Succession. We'll see. And that's it. I think that wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't practiced.
And that's just so beautiful, isn't it that that ability to love in a space where love was so inhibited and so fought against, and all the odds stacked against it, and yet there it is, still happening. And like I said, I think understanding also that you can structure that there is a structure to this experience, like there's a structure to this physical spiritual experience that we're pursuing, that's really laid out and quite clear and concise, and there's a structure to this practice. And my love was also structured now. It has to be, because there are things that I know will result in suffering if I allow them in, or things that just don't help. They don't help me, or they don't help my mum. And those boundaries are really important, and it can be really hard to hold those in place as well. And especially, I think, if you move into that spiritual space of love and light, and spiritual bypassing.
It's so good.
It's so good. Everything's fun. I love everyone. I can see that they're just suffering too. It doesn't hurt.
I think the Ashtanga practice is very good for creating those firm, creating the strength with the flexibility. But the boundaries are the strength.
They are the strength.
They are the container.
Yeah, exactly. And that really allows freedom. It allows it allows love to flow freely, and that's what I think it does for me. And I am incredibly grateful to it for that, and I'm incredibly inspired by anyone who I see overcoming addiction or surviving the trauma of having addicted parents, because it's coming back from something so dark and so sad and tragic. And I feel that those people really flourish and grow and blossom in such an incredibly magnetic, beautiful way when they do manage to do that it's a real honor to see and speak to.
Lucinda, I've never actually had the pleasure of meeting you in person, I think.
No.
But I will say that every time I've interacted with you, I've felt so much admiration for you and your intellect and your courage to share. And I've also kind of also know in my heart, being a adult child of alcoholic, you like to party. And you recognize that in other people. It's like, oh yeah, she likes to party.
I used to. I go to bed too early now. But
I know my people. I recognize them right away. As, oh, here we go. Here's a live one. And so I just I'm really grateful that you came on the show, because it is nice to sit with your people and to share the community, share the foibles of this mortal coil and
so-called life.
This so-called charade they call it life. It's just, this has been a fabulous talk, and I just want to say how grateful I am that you came on to share it with us.
Thank you guys so much.
Join you are you teaching in person or online these days?
It's hybrid. It's quite small and intimate. It's just on a Friday morning, 6 till 8. So nice and Ashtangi early for everyone who wants to get up there. And they're more than welcome to join. And I am so very grateful and honoured to be asked by you guys and to talk with you here. It's really nice. And like you say, it just feels so great to talk with people that you feel a familiarity with. And I would encourage anyone who's feeling that way, that they like experiencing the things that we've been talking about, to reach out and speak to anyone, that either myself or anyone. There are charities and things out there that you can reach out to talk about however old you are about your experiences, because it makes a huge difference once you start sharing that story and working with it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to chat with you.
So much. So nice to see you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Finding Harmony with me, your host, Harmony Slater. You can find out more information on my website, harmonyslater.com, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Standing in eternity's shadow, watching the breaking waves. There's a hard wind and the soil